Next up will be a discussion on the topic Coming Closer Together, the hybrid transformation of B2B communities. The discussion will take notice of how rapidly we have changed our habits and learned to transform our work environments from in-person to online. Also, as we can already see that many of us have already found the benefits of the choice to work remotely. However, it's very interesting to think about what will become of the hybrid events and what will become of our digital communities. Will we continue on with them? Will they die? Or maybe we'll find ways, and entrepreneurs will find more ways and innovations how to build upon these niches and how to create products within this hybrid situation. So I'm inviting online for us to join Tassilo Ott from talque and Kaspars Dancis from Whimsical and the moderator Adela Pujule. Welcome.
So, good afternoon, gentlemen. Hi to everyone who's listening to us here and also online. Before we start off, just a quick introduction. So we have Tassilo with us, who is the founder of talque, a digital event platform. And Tassilo has, after finishing his doctorate in theoretical physics and string theory, dealt with a lot of product development in digital online services within his career. So, hi. And also with us, we have Kaspars Dancis, who is the co-founder and CEO of Whimsical, collaboration made easy online, as they describe it online on their platform. And he also has had a plus 20-year experience of product and engineering leadership. So, good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hi, hello.
Hi. And if there are no corrections on the introductions from your side, we might jump right in. And I have already the first question to Tassilo. So with talque giving companies the opportunity of creating these digital events and creating these, for example, as we saw, there were virtual pitch contests or networking. How do you see this tool being utilized after the pandemic is over and this is not a requirement, but more of an opportunity?
Yeah, I'm absolutely sure about it, that it will continue, but not, of course, not in exactly the same manner like it did at the moment, right? I mean, many conference organizers said, okay, we are doing our event now digital, and we don't really know what hybrid now is, because now we are getting into a phase where the people are thinking, will we do it on premise? Will we do it on the stage? Will we do it purely digitally? And I personally have an opinion that this is a chance, this is a possibility of creating something new, but in the past hasn't really worked out. And that are these hybrid communities. For me, a hybrid community is something people actually that meet in real life from occasion to occasion, but in the meanwhile, have a digital conversation and keep up basically the connection between them, and not just on a yearly basis, but basically mainly on a monthly basis. And that's the big chance that we have right now. And there are already event organizers that are doing these kind of things. So there's mainly a main event 2 times a year, and in between there are digital workshops, and that really works out quite well.
Great. So, Kaspar, how do you see these collaboration tools online working out after this becomes more of an opportunity rather than a requirement?
Yeah, I mean, so I can speak more from not so much from a community perspective, but from running companies. And companies are ultimately communities too. I think it's one thing is clear that kind of work will inevitably become more and more digital. So most of the work will kind of keep moving towards this digital space. And then I think what inevitably happens is that people also kind of need to get together physically, but that's like a separate thing. That's kind of where you meet maybe every few months and really just have FaceTime. But like from where we stand, like most of the kind of successful companies are pretty much permanently moving kind of their core work to digital space.
So both of you have already mentioned this cooperation within communities. How do you see this business-to-business community functioning, for example, cross-border now when we have these digital solutions that can facilitate them?
Yeah, I think still a lot has to be done, right? Because let's say, for instance, take a trade fair. A trade fair usually happened on a specific spot and people traveled there, right? So they met there in real life, basically, and it's definitely also the way how they prefer to do it. On the other hand, now we have a pandemic and many countries are basically, for many countries, it's still impossible to come to a specific trade fair. So now people have to think about how can I participate digitally? But then the question is, what does that exactly mean? Does that mean that the person, goes to specific sessions, has specific conversations with video call instead of meeting at a meeting spot? Or does it mean also for exhibitors to have a digital exhibitor stand? I mean, and I think all of these cases have to be tried out. At the moment, nobody really knows what works out and what doesn't, because you have to try it out. In the past, this wasn't the case. Either something was purely digital or something was purely on-premise. And there are, of course, problems when you try to combine these two things together. For instance, in a meeting, everybody knows that it's rather hard, although not impossible, to have people on the one hand side meet in a room, right, with these Jabra speakers, and at the same time have one or two participants joining online. In the past, people didn't really try this at all. I mean, when we had 3-4 years ago various tries, in the end, it was always after 5 minutes or 10 minutes, people were interrupting these. And then, so the people on premise spoke together and the digital people were basically cut out. But now during the pandemic, that created a big problem, of course, because important people were also just joining digitally. And in that case, you had to combine these two things together, and people tried hard and somehow it works out. It's still not ideal, I would say. I mean, there's a lot of invention that still can be done in that respect, but people tried it out and now we're used to these kind of things. But this is the hardest part, let's say. I mean, before I was saying, what does hybrid mean? It can mean basically two things. The one is like something happens on the spot from time to time and between FaceTime, and in between you have digital events like Zoom calls, basically. It could also mean that these two things are combined. There's one Zoom call that people are sitting in a room discussing together, and some other people are joining online. I think that what we have right now, also the technology that we have right now, is not yet ideal for that. But at some time it will be. At least we found out that these things can work, that you can have a 3-4 hour discussion where some people are online and some other people are on premise. It works out, but there are definitely more inventions needed to really make it work fine.
Yeah, I share kind of the same opinions that, like, I don't think we have figured out how to make like proper hybrid events, both like kind of public and also inside companies. And ultimately it seems more like from what I've seen, more of a culture issue, where if something is kind of happening in physical locations, there are some folks there will always be gravity towards kind of a lot of stuff happening and people who are physically present not kind of having the same connection to people who are remote. So I think technology can definitely improve there, but like it has to come together with just this culture of how do you participate events, how do you run events when you have people in these two modes of operation. And for now, it's definitely very challenging. Like every time somebody tries to do that, I haven't seen it kind of working very well.
Yeah, Kasper, following up on the point you made about this gravity and organization of events, where people do, especially for networking, still gravitate towards in-person situations rather than what is happening online. Do you really see the hybrid kind of version of events going that length and actually finding a solution where people would be able to network online as well as it happens in person? Or will in-person events still have this upper hand?
Yeah, I think it's networking, like in these two modes. I think for networking, you absolutely want to be physically present. And then, I mean, if an event like this one, when there's some conversation which is actually useful to a lot of folks just to kind of follow online, that definitely works. But you kind of, I don't think you can really mix these two kind of goals together. It's probably, I would say it's better to you just kind of upfront decide what's important for your event. Is it like mostly about networking or mostly about content, and then kind of go from there. If you kind of say it's both those things, then it kind of, I don't think it would be very effective today.
Right. So previously you mentioned innovation. So that is definitely a topic I wanted to touch upon with both of you. For example, in a digital event platform, do you see the startup environment growing from local communities to more of a cross-border environment? So to specify maybe a little bit, if for now we see a lot of startup communities, for example, in Riga, taking place, and what we have, for example, tech hub events, a lot of local businessmen coming together and creating these local solutions. Can we, with digital solutions, create it like cross-border, find ways how to cope with a lot of global problems with this cooperation, also on a startup level?
For sure. I mean, I'm absolutely sure about it. I mean, we have some events in our portfolio, say, that had 1,000 people for years and years as a number of participants for their, for their local event. But now suddenly it's digital, and they made some good digital marketing, and so the event was, propagating into about 10 more countries, and we had 4,000 people instead of 1,000 people. We were still counting 1,000 people because they thought we will never get over that border, but suddenly they had 4,000 people participating. So that's a great chance, of course, that people don't see. I mean, there are also other things like take a music festival, for instance, right? There are music festivals that are very high quality music festivals where we don't really get a ticket. I mean, you have to buy the ticket 2 years in advance to get one, and they're very expensive. But these festivals would have the possibility of have a digital broadcasting, and also, of a factor of 10 at least, if I would think about things like digital participation tickets, right? That's for most of the organizers, that's still complicated because they don't want to cannibalize their own business, basically, which is basically on-premise business, the business we really know for years, right, to get people together at a place. That is very important, but I think these two things can still be, combined into something even more powerful, in my opinion. But people still have to show examples of that. I mean, there are some. There was a jazz festival, for instance, in Germany, which was happening digitally, and they had completely new target groups integrated, which just would have taken all the travel, over half the world, and I don't know, 5,000, 10,000 euros of traveling costs alone to do that, but now participated digitally, and they're great plus for the event. So I think every event organizer should think about that, but of course you have to see what is my possible target group. I mean, do I get some merit by targeting these faraway countries or not? And if you say generally yes, then let's just try it. I mean, there's no reason why not to do it. For the meetings of networking, I would disagree basically that people don't want to connect digitally. They want to do that. Sometimes we have these speed dates and so on. People are really keen on doing that. But what I definitely must say, it always separates in between the digital people and a bit for analog people. The analog people were doing the networking only with the analog people, and the digital people only with digital people. So there still we have to do something, but that is exactly what startups have to think about, like new solutions that nobody thought about it before. And I think it will be a transformation process that takes several years, but people will come up with more clever solutions of how to integrate these two very distinct communities.
So with that, we can
But they belong together. I mean, they have a common topic, they have common things to speak about. So why should they not be able to do that?
Exactly. So with that, we can rest assured that the sector most definitely will still have a lot of room to develop, and startups still have a lot to innovate on. Kasper, after going into a bit of a deep dive within Whimsical and the services and products you provide, I have a question to you. So we heard from Tassilo that within events and digital events, this networking and cross-border cooperation is possible and even encouraged, and people are willing to try this out. What about this day-to-day conducting of business? So for example, you offer a lot of cooperation tools as creating flowcharts, shared documents. I absolutely love the sticky note solution. Do you see companies being ready to go into this day-to-day business activity with cross-border partners and while using these digital solutions?
I definitely think it's a future. And to just give you an example, like Whimsical, we are 15 people across 6 different time zones, from US West Coast to Latvia. And we've been working that way from day one. It's, of course, it's not a shift that happens in one day. You need to adapt in working different ways, but it's kind of slowly happening. We see more and more companies adopting this new way of working, and it's possible, and in many ways it can be even much more effective than like being physically present in office. And not even speaking of all other benefits, like just for companies having access to better talent, for individuals to actually having access to better opportunities. The one thing that's purely on a business side that's challenging is that it doesn't work well if companies try to adopt like physical work patterns to digital space, because it's kind of, it works differently. There are different priorities. Like it has to be more asynchronous and other things, and culture needs to change. But the companies that figure that out, like they kind of get ahead and like they will be the ones who will be very successful in 5-10 years.
To quickly follow up on that, you mentioned that here as well, culture needs to change within the work habits. How do you see that changing? What do you believe the change that needs to happen is?
And most fundamentally, it's about learning to work and think asynchronously, which means like you kind just, like whenever you have some idea, you can just go to the desk of your coworker and tap on shoulder and talk about it. I mean, you could sort of do it in digital space, like through messaging apps and things like that, but it's kind of not great. And there's like all these stories about from pandemic about just people spending whole day on Zooms. Like if that's the case, then you're basically doing it wrong. You are not doing work. You are just kind of keeping yourself busy.
Yeah. That's definitely an issue that has come up again and again. Do you, and this is again a question to both of you, do you think that people will be willing to continue this hybrid events or hybrid working after the pandemic is over? Or are there signs that people are just so tired of the online environment that they might want to kind of prefer this in-person meeting, in-person work? Or is that not even possible anymore?
Well, I can speak from, so there's, when you say hybrid work for companies, I think what they mean by that nowadays is that some days you are in office and some days you are remote. And I don't think that's a good idea. I think the kind of people sort of have split in two camps, and I think companies will do too. Like some, let's say half of all knowledge workers feel really strongly that they don't ever want to go back to office. And then there's other half which feels like working from home. It's just they need kind of physical presence. They need like social aspects of working together, and so they are very much want to go back to office. And I think companies will just need to figure out which camps they are in. Either you are office company or you are digital company, and then like they will attract those kind of one of those groups of people accordingly. Combining it, maybe somebody will figure it out, but right now I'm fairly skeptical. It's just because like the whole culture needs to be different, and they don't really combine well.
Yeah, I don't know. I see it a little bit differently. I think, I mean, we are in an adopting phase. At the moment, it's clear after 1.5 years, people want to get back to physical. That's clear. Because they have been, in lockdown sometimes for 1.5 years. So it's obvious that they want to be in our space. On the other hand, there are absolute merits of home office, for instance, of working working at home at specific things, because sometimes you can concentrate much better. You can go into something very deep, right? Make your own thoughts, what you basically many people cannot do at work, because there's always somebody coming and tipping your shoulder, as you've just explained it. So I think, on the other hand, creativity sometimes means you have to work on something together, and it's much better to work on something at a blackboard than at a mirror space, in my opinion. That's my personal opinion. And of course, people need social contact to be creative and to be inspired by other people as well. But on the other hand, all the working life of everybody has the two things, right? He has to work on something deep and produce results and do something, and communicate with our people. I think communication generally works better on the spot, like in a real meeting and so on. But even that is not necessarily true. Sometimes we found out that Zoom meetings can be rather effective, right? Especially, for instance, also in other areas like sales. I mean, our sales process before the pandemic, it was mostly a physical sales process. I mean, really went to event organizers and talked to them, and spent something like half a day to travel there, half a day to get back. In the end, the result of a conversion rate is exactly the same conversion rate what we have now with a half an hour or 45-minute Zoom conference. So it can be, there's no difference in it. Yeah, and that is of course a different area. So you really have to see what is the working environment for that specific person. Is he a programmer? Is he a creative person? And it's definitely different. But generally speaking, I would say that for almost every job, there are parts where home office can really work very well, and where office work can work very well. And you just have to find the balance for your specific job, and companies have to pay respect to it. I don't think it's a good idea if a company says, now pandemic is over and now everybody has to come to work 5 days a week. I think actually the truth is always somewhere in between, a balance between office work and home work.
Right, so going back to, then we come back to the understanding that we are not going to completely forget all the digital solutions that have come as a requirement throughout the pandemic, and this is most definitely going to be something still implemented within the business community also after the pandemic. The question is, do you believe that there even is a possibility for a company to completely forget the digital solutions and completely go out of that? Or is the business world changed so much over the past 1.5 years that there is no way of kind of avoiding these digital solutions and companies just have to get on board at this point?
I mean, I'm biased. I will definitely say there's no way going back. I think if I mean, there are other trends, like one is like this move towards like forcing people to work from home, definitely brought a whole lot of like new software into companies. But there's other trends that's happening where companies are also becoming more open to sort of ad hoc adoption of software, so to speak, instead of like somebody from at the top level management say, we are going to use this. We are seeing a lot of, like, especially in bigger companies, teams just choosing their own tools. And that way, like, individuals who actually use a software, not somebody who decides like which software to buy, are kind of always looking for best, most kind of useful, most convenient tool for specific job at hand. And that just means like there will be more and more different types of digital solutions that the companies in some way end up adopting in that space. Just looking at the market, how many different companies there are that are growing very fast and doing all kinds of things to really build this digital space. It's like, it seems like it's 10 times bigger than it was like 4 years ago.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, definitely many companies will go back, but I think you cannot go back if you want to be successful. So I think in the end, people will find out that those companies that adopt digital solutions, even on the long term, are the most successful. I think many companies will nevertheless go back. Now, because of several reasons, because of the fatigue of a pandemic and so on, and people don't want to work with digital solution and so on. I think also that tools are not the right question. I mean, if a company wants to be successful, they should rather think about processes than tools, because a tool can only help a process, but you can have the best tools in your company, and nevertheless, if nobody uses them correctly or really makes the best out of the tool, then you will not be successful with it. So what you really have to think about is what should be the process be, right? And of course, the sales process, something completely different than the creativity process and so on. You should always start with the process and try to model those, and then find out what digital tool is the best really to help you with this.
Right. So as we are approaching the last couple of minutes of this discussion, I think we can definitely come to the conclusion that the big question within this discussion of whether or not we still will see these hybrid digital and in-person events and work collaborations after the pandemic, the answer most definitely will be yes. Companies most definitely have to look out for these digital solutions, and as Tassilo just very well mentioned, actually adopt the procedure and the process of using them correctly. And most definitely words of encouragement for all the new entrepreneurs that this is not a sector that has already been filled, but there still is a lot of innovation that can take place and that has to take place for this to be a really successful kind of process of transformation. Do you have any last remarks of encouragement for our new entrepreneurs who might look at this sector as a potential sector where to invest their time, their ideas, and their energy?
Yeah, I think there's one thing I would like to mention. That would be, if you want to, collaborate with a corporate, then you should always think about digitalize the core business of that corporate, right? Because let's say now in the pandemic, let's say our investor, for instance, he's invested in something like 15, or one of our investors invested in 15 different startups, and there are about 4 of them were actually successful even during and now after the pandemic. And those are the startups that really thought about digitalizing. I mean, I'm talking about B2B. B2C is a different topic. But if you think about B2B, working with corporates, then if you digitize the core business of a corporate, there's almost no way of not being successful, because you have changed the core business of that corporate somehow, and you have been a real value add. And during the pandemic, they will not say, okay, sorry, I don't have the time to think about this anymore because I have something more important to do, but they will come to you and tell you, I need your help. And that's something I generally think, if you want to work with corporates, do something like core business. Never do something like a little program which we could do or couldn't do, because that will never be successful, in my personal opinion.
Right. Kasper, any words of encouragement for our listeners?
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been a better time to start a company like that creates like this type of tools for digital work, as it's clear that this will only it's already seen a huge growth in last couple of years, but it will only get bigger. More companies will just kind of permanently shift to more digital work. And the only thing I would kind of encourage people, entrepreneurs, to think about is always kind of think global and build something that works at the global scale, because like it's the work is, knowledge workers are working globally. You know, a lot of companies already, and definitely in future, there no longer will be like I think constraints of physical locations. So then it also makes sense for tools to always kind of start with a global mindset instead of kind of being locally oriented at first.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. Best of luck on your future endeavors and in this new transformation of our communities and business. And I hope to see you also in an in-person event sometime soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye.